Welcome to Design Domination, where you'll learn to become a better, more business-savvy designer so you can dominate your competition. Hi, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Colleen Grotzer, and in this episode of Design Domination, I've got a special guest, Kelly Irvine, and we are going to talk about her career as an artist and freelance textile print designer, focusing on the fashion market. Kelly Irvine is an artist and freelance textile print designer focusing on the fashion market, and she received her BS in advertising design, graphic design from the University of Maryland and worked as an in-house graphic designer for private industry and the federal government for over 25 years. And this was all while studying painting, designing, and making handbags and hoarding, collecting patterned fabrics. Welcome to the podcast, Kelly. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Colleen. Thanks. It's great to be here. I love listening to your podcast.
Oh, well, thanks. I love it when guests start out with that. You might be the first one.
Really? Oh, yeah. No, not at all.
So I've got to start out with a couple of fun questions. And the first one is, would you rather have a bad haircut or a bad dye job?
I think probably a bad dye job because you could just go and recolor that thing and no one would know. But I've had a bad haircut and that was torture living that one out.
Oh no. How long did it take until you had some?
It was mainly an issue with bangs, asymmetrical
Oh,
bangs. So, that took a few months. It wasn't as bad as it could be.
yeah, sure. And what was the worst job that you ever had?
That's an interesting question. I feel like I haven't had like a total nightmare job that some people have had, but I think probably I would have to say my very first job, I was in high school, I think 10th grade, and I was all excited because I got a job at the record store across the street from where we lived. And I thought, this is so cool. I'll have all these records, And the very first night there, they told me I had to clean the employee restroom, which was disgusting. I don't know that it had ever actually been cleaned in a long time. So,
Oh,
mm,
ick.
yeah. It was a bit of a downer, but I managed.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, so you were doing graphic design for 25 years. I've been in the industry just the same amount of time, actually. And so, how did you get into textile design?
Well, I've always enjoyed graphic design. I think at heart, I'm an artist, and practicality is always a concern. So, as encouraged by my mother, I became something that wasn't quite as financially risky, at least in our minds, as being an artist. So I became a graphic designer, and I loved being a graphic designer for many many years. Um, but at the same time, I've always been, as you mentioned, I've always been interested in painting, sewing, doing like fiber based crafts like crocheting, knitting. And as you also mentioned, I started making my own bags. I really got into textiles and, printed fabrics and would kind of collect those, make bags from them. And then I guess maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I really started paying attention to the fashion industry and particularly printed fabrics, like clothes that had really wild, interesting prints. In particular, brands like Marimekko or La Kylie, Bowden. Gorman is an Australian brand, Bowden is a British brand. And I kind of just became a little bit obsessed. And, after a couple of furloughs in the federal government where, kind of was at home and not working, and I just kind of started thinking, well, this is obviously a profession too, just like graphic design. Someone must design these fabrics. And I just started researching it more and taking a few classes online, and that's how it started.
That's really cool. Well, now I'm wondering, did you ever design something as a textile design and end up using it in your graphic designs?
That is a good question. I don't think Well, I might have. I think actually I was kind of subconsciously doing that
Mhm.
before I even thought about textile design. So it wasn't a textile design, but occasionally like you have to design a cover for a report or something. And I always found myself going, ha, I'll just go ahead and, I'll make some kind of abstract pattern because that's one of the things I specialize in is abstract. I do abstract painting And
Hmm.
so I like to do abstract patterns as well. And so I would do like, a little paint splatter or, a geometric pattern and kind of try to slip those in as like a cover design for a publication. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, yeah. So it was lurking and I didn't even realize it.
That's awesome. Well, I love your work. I follow you on Instagram and I just love your patterns.
Oh, thank you so much, Colleen. That's always great to hear, especially since, I consider myself still to be in the early years of this. And that's wonderful because it's a user-based, consumer-based industry. So to hear that someone likes your stuff is
Mhm.
definitely validating. Thank you.
Mhm. You left your job as a graphic designer. What made you decide to switch to textile design?
Well, as we know, I was in the profession for such a long time, and I just started to feel like, even though it was a great that last job I was in for the federal government, it was a wonderful opportunity because being one of two, well, for most of the time there, I was the only designer, and then
Mhm.
we expanded a little bit and became a two-person shop. So there was so much to do there. So I really got this wonderful breadth of projects, not, print design, some web designs, some design for social media, exhibit design, environmental signage, the whole nine yards. So it was great. But finally, even with all that opportunity, after so many years, I just began to think, maybe there's something else out there for me. And as we've talked about, I've always enjoyed painting, and I had started to do a lot of illustrating at my job
Mhm.
too, like creating editorial illustrations for articles. And I just really have always loved the art, like the creating the art or the illustration side of things, which not all graphic designers do, and you don't have to if you're a graphic designer. And then just getting more and more into textile design, not even thinking it as a profession, but then realizing, this kind of combines graphic design, illustration, and art. Um, and like I said, getting, just wanting to move on, looking for something else. And I began to look at, well, maybe I could really do this as a job. And I joined this online community called Textile Design Lab, which is an educational community. You can take trainings and classes in how to actually do textile design, surface pattern design. But it was there that I learned about the opportunities and how you could actually, make that your profession. And so I was kind of ready to just do something new no matter what anyway. And so I just kind of took the leap and did it. And here I am.
That's really cool. Well, so what are some things that are important to know about having textile design as a career?
Well, one thing, especially coming from a background as a graphic designer, is there is a ton of skill overlap between graphic design and textile design.
Mhm.
Photoshop and Illustrator are the main programs that you would use. So, I'm like, check, check, got those. And of course, I mean, as we all know, Photoshop is such a huge, robust piece of software. So there's always stuff you don't know how to do in Photoshop. It's just, you and I, we've been using Photoshop since it was Photoshop, not any version, but still,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
right?
I still can't use it most of it. I just do a few things in it.
Oh yeah, like you have your things that you do for your job, and that's plenty. Just
Right.
staying on top of that and on top of the updates. And so moving into textile design, surface pattern design, it's still great that you have the foundation. Like there's still tons of stuff there that people without that background is a huge learning curve for them. That's not for you. But then, there's like the kind of group of things I use Photoshop for that I would not have been using before. And but that's totally learnable. So that's the first big thing. Is if you're coming from a graphic design background, you've got like 50% of it covered already with that knowledge. Also knowledge of the printing industry, while they may not be using offset presses and printing to paper, um, it's still kind of the same basic knowledge and understanding how printing works and separations. There's printing fabrics can be done two ways, can be done digitally or what they call wet printing, which is basically screen printing. So I didn't do a lot of screen printing hardly at all as a graphic designer, but I had knowledge of it. I know how that works. And just the whole idea of separating out into colors is just really helpful to know in general about that. The other thing I would say is it's actually there are like four different markets you can go with. Like I've chosen to right now to focus on the fashion market, and just like with graphic design, it's really helpful to kind of have a niche that you focus on. I mean, I think that that's a good way to kind of focus your efforts and attract customers. Um, so there's the fashion market, but there's also the home decor market, and that would include creating designs for things like bedding, towels, sheets, kitchen linens, things like that, upholstery fabric, wallpaper. And then there's the stationery, or some people call it stationery market or gift market. So that's things like journals, cards, gift bags, gift wrap. And then there's the what some people call the quilting market, which is if you go into a fabric store and buy fabric by the yard, and it's the printed fabric. And a lot of the really interesting, fun prints are used by people who are quilters. So that's why it's sometimes referred to as the quilting market. And then the other thing is just there's different ways, just like with graphic design, there's different types of jobs. You can be freelance, you can be in-house, you can work for a studio, and you can work with an agent. So that's kind of a similarity that carries over.
That's really interesting. So I imagine though, okay, so you're saying your graphic design knowledge helps with this. But then I'm thinking, okay, what about like, you know how with different types of paper in the printing industry, some types of paper that like coated paper, it's not going to absorb the ink as much. And so with uncoated paper it does, and that will darken the color. So do you have that same kind of challenge when you're choosing fabrics too?
Well, that's interesting. So as a textile designer, I have not been in the position, and I think typically would not be in the position of choosing fabrics. I would imagine, and again, like I am still in the early years of exploring the industry, but I would imagine if you worked in-house for a brand, then you might have a better idea of what fabric they would be using it for. And you would take that into consideration. And I think they have something similar to press checks where like they have like you have strike offs, which are like proofs. And that I think that's at that point where you say, okay, on this fabric, this is looking too dark, and you would adjust. But yeah, so there is definitely that consideration. There's working as I do. I'm freelance for a textile studio, so they're kind of like the middleman. They're a studio that brands will come to buy prints, and so you don't know at the time you're designing exactly what type of fabric or garment it will be going on, but I do have an idea, what, like, because I'll receive from the studio, myself and the other artists that work freelance for the studio will provide a mood board or direction board, and we'll look at that to get the idea of what type of prints they're looking for in terms of like a floral or a geometric or an abstract, and kind of what colors they'll include, like a color palette. And based on that, you'll have a pretty good idea like, okay, this is going to go on swimwear, or this is going to go on women's ready to wear or active wear. And so that'll kind of give you an idea of, how it will be used. And, you also can take into consideration the scale. Like swimwear, you want something small because it's little pieces of fabric. And if it was like a really big scale, the print would be lost. You wouldn't really see what it is. So I went off on a tangent, but but yeah. So I think the type of substrate, just like paper with design, with graphic design, the type of fabric with print design definitely affects how it looks when printed.
That's really interesting. And then, you were talking earlier too about using Illustrator and Photoshop, but you do a lot of painting. So, how do you normally create the prints, and when do you decide, okay, I'm going to paint this, or I'm going to start in Illustrator or Photoshop if you ever do that, or do you like paint something and then maybe take a picture of it or try to recreate it? Like how do you normally approach that when you're creating?
Right, that's a really good question, and every designer approaches it a little bit different. But all of the possibilities you mentioned are actual possibilities. Um, I think for uh, me, I like to paint, and my style is kind of, as you've seen, like kind of loose. Kind of, you can see the hand drawn or hand painted look to it, the brushy look sometimes. So, but I also like, I like my devices. like, so it's a lot easier in a way to start on my iPad. A lot of designers use Procreate. I use Adobe Fresco, and that's more just because I'm so familiar with all the other Adobe products. It was, in my mind, easier to start with Fresco, but it's comparable to Procreate, and it's specifically for mobile devices where you have like an Apple Pencil. You use it in tandem with your iPad or tablet, and they have a bunch of different brush strokes, wet media like paint, charcoal, pencil, marker, and it does a pretty good job of simulating that. You can control the brush width, the pressure, and I will typically either draw on that and try to, and they let you you can do layers in that, just how you can do layers in Photoshop. Yeah. So I try to keep things separated into as many layers as possible, because that helps later when I bring it into Photoshop. There's the capability also with Fresco to, especially if you're on an iPad, to do a what is it called, like an airdrop, and drop it right onto my laptop, and open in Photoshop. I'll try to create the individual motifs, each on a different layer. So a motif would be like, say you're doing a floral pattern, each unique flower is a different motif. And then if the motif has more than one color, I'll also try to create each color fill on a different layer. This is still all on my iPad. And then I'll open it in Photoshop when I feel like I have enough motifs. And that's where I start playing around with the composition, the layout, going in and changing the colors, which is usually pretty easy as long as I've remembered to keep the color fills on separate layers. If not, then, I got to do a little bit of, fancy selecting and cutting. So that's one way I do it. And then sometimes I will actually just paint on a canvas or on a piece of paper or draw, and then it's the same process. Like, I would scan it in. And at that point, all the colors are on one flat thing. So it would either just be a really simple drawing or painting that doesn't have a lot of colors, or if I feel like it's worth it, I'll go and kind of hand separate them out in Photoshop, like cutting things out and, giving them separate layers when they didn't originally have it. Or I'll do like an abstract painting, and I won't bother, it's too complex, but I'll still bring it into Photoshop to kind of piece it together so it can form a repeating pattern if needed.
And how do you get inspired when you go to create these prints?
Well, as I said, if it's for the studio I'm working for, they'll provide mood boards, but you
Right.
still have to make sure that it's your own personal style, and you're still coming from a place of your own inspiration, because the last thing they want is for all the designers they're working for to turn in prints that all look kind of the same.
Right.
So, right. So that was something I had to learn. But typically, how I get inspired, whether it's for the studio or for something I'm just doing on my own, is I try to go for a walk outside every day. And luckily, where I live now here in Baltimore, even though I'm within the city limits, there's a lot of wooded areas and like really nice paths, and people have flowers growing in front of their houses, especially in spring. So I'm crazy with the camera. I'm probably walking 50% of the time and taking pictures 50% of the time. And I just know at some point someone's going to come out and say, "What are you taking pictures of in front of my house?" And I'll show them, "See, it's really just flowers." But I'm a sucker for like beautiful flowering trees and plants. And even just like textures, I'm also a sucker for textures. Like, there is this, I don't know, it's some kind of metal utility pole down the block from me. It's this really fat, wide pole, and it has all kind of layers of peeling paint and rust on it. I have taken so many pictures of that thing. And I know I'm going to turn that into an abstract print one day. So it's all in my Google Photos.
Oh, wow. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, so I know you have like the studio that you do freelance work for, but the designs that you do for yourself, do you sell them anywhere like Cafe Press or Zazzle, like put them on different products and things like that?
Yes, I do. I have currently have a store on Spoonflower and on
Mhm.
Society 6. Spoonflower is great. because it actually serves a purpose for me besides selling is you can order yardage of fabric from there. And so since I sew, if I'm in the mood and I have time, I can order some fabric, and they have all different kinds of fabrics with my designs printed on them, and make something for myself and wear that out and about as like kind of a little self-marketing thing. But they also have like some bedding and things like that. And then Society 6 has a wider range of products, iPhone cases, just kind of everything, t-shirts, tents, furniture, rugs, quite a wide variety, some stationery. So that's where I am right now. I'm on those two sites, but the ones you mentioned, like Zazzle, that's a great one too. And it's just a matter of picking the one that you think offers the most of what you're looking for, really.
Yeah, Zazzle has a lot. I have 2 stores. I have one on Cafe Press and I have one on Zazzle. And I've had gosh, I think since 2008 or 2009 now. I don't do anything actively with them, but I'm very familiar with them because I uploaded a whole bunch of things that I designed to promote like animal rescue.
Oh
And so I
yeah.
have a lot of like pet, you know, themed things and animal rescue themed things and pillows and shirts and all that stuff. But what I don't like about them is that when they add new products, I mean, I think it's a setting you can turn on or off, but there's a setting where if they add a new product, they'll automatically add your design, and sometimes things don't line up. So then it's like
Oh,
that's in my store now, and I have to go through and take it out. I haven't even touched them in a few years, but I make like, I make a little bit of money from them, every month or so,
yeah, that's
doing
how I
nothing.
yeah, 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 it really is pretty passive. Once you upload everything, it is pretty passive, if you want it to be. I mean, I will when COVID started and they were, doing masks, I promoted that a little bit on my social media. But yeah, that's how it is for me. I would say every month or so, someone will buy a yard or two of fabric with my prints on it, or a doormat or a mug or something, and it's fun. And one of the cool things actually about Spoonflower is they have these monthly competitions where they'll have a theme. And I normally, as a graphic designer, did not support the idea of competitions where a bunch of designers submit things and only one gets picked, and then you haven't been paid for your work. But it's different on Spoonflower because they have a theme, and if you want to participate, you upload your design, and then there's sometimes there's a prize, but it's like audience favorites. And if you are in the top, I don't know what, 50, you'll get promotion. I did one competition so far, and I was really excited. I was 35 out of like 200 or some, and I got a lot of sales based on that. But then it's in your online store anyway, so you've got it there for sale, and it gets promoted, and so that's actually a good way to drive people to your Spoonflower shop, is to participate in those competitions. They usually have like 3 or 4 every month. So
Are they one of like so Cafe Press and Zazzle, they allow you to put like a feed of the products from your store on your own website. So you could create a website and then you have the feed in there. So then you could buy a domain name. I mean, because I know this because I've done it. I've
yeah,
done a
yeah.
lot of domain names for this. So I've got my Cafe Press shop, I've got my Zazzle shop, but then I've got a separate website where I bring in the products, and then when they click through to, go buy the product, they're still paying for it on the Cafe Press or Zazzle platform.
Right.
Does Spoonflower allow for that too, to put your products on your own site like that?
I don't know for sure, but I'm not going to say that they don't.
Mhm.
It seems more likely that Society 6 would allow that, but yeah, like, is that like a Shopify kind of integration, or?
I just did it as they had some kind of PHP feed or something, so I just did it that
Okay.
way. So I designed the site just however, and then I just
Mhm.
had like that one area where the feed would come in with the products, and then you could filter it out by which ones were shown on that page. So you can show, this design on this page, and then you have this design on another page instead of having
Right.
like everything just come in from your store and it's not organized.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I don't know. I'm gonna have to investigate that. That's a great idea. Yeah, I mean, I had heard of that. There's a couple other print-on-demand sites that I know, allow you to integrate it into your website, and I haven't
Mhm.
researched that, but that sounds like a great idea.
That's your next step right there.
That's my next step. Yeah, I actually, um, I'm not going to say what it is, but I would like to later, hopefully by later this year, introduce an actual product that I have in mind with my prints on it. And so I still have to figure that out because I would like to not have to have yet another website to send people to. It'd be nice to
Hmm.
integrate it into my website, which I actually just launched my own personal website for print design. So it's print design and painting. So it's in the bare bones stage. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
So again, I know you're freelancing for this studio, but do you also pursue freelancing clients outside of that too?
Yes, actually, that's a great question.
So
And
where do you
so,
find the clients for that?
right. So, actually, what my plan is to apply to some additional studios
Hmm.
and work because, that's kind of it's kind of like with clients, you don't want to just have one client. So now that I've been working for, I guess, about a year, a little, well, actually more than a year, about a year and a half for the current studio that I'm working for, which is White Buffalo Studio. And that's been great. And that's a whole other thing I can talk about. But yeah, I see that it's probably good to branch out. And
Hmm.
I plan to approach some other studios because, like, the more places where your work is, the more you're getting exposure. It's just, like numbers, the more likely you are to sell. I haven't, in terms of directly searching clients, that's something you could do. I think that would be either more of approaching for an in-house job or, approaching directly, their design director and saying, I'd like to collaborate with you. And that is another way to go. I haven't tried that avenue yet.
Hmm. Well, you said you could talk about more about the studio. What
Ye-
else would you say about that? What would you elaborate
Yeah,
on?
well, yeah, I wanted to mention that because
Hmm.
talking about how I learned about textile design in general, I'm going to backtrack a little bit,
Hmm.
but
Sure.
when I first started realizing this was a profession, and I thought, okay, how do you learn about it? Like, is there a degree program at a college where I could go or get a certificate or something? And not in this area. We're talking about the metropolitan Washington, Baltimore area. Really not, there's a lot of colleges, but that's not a program that really exists as such. Now, if you go to New York or LA or Britain or Australia, those are very popular programs in colleges and universities. So, what I found was an online kind of community educational resource called Textile Design Lab, which I think I mentioned before. And they are just this wonderful portal for all kinds of classes for people just starting out, learning how to do textile print design, to people who have some experience, but just you need to learn more techniques. I mean, it's just great. And you can get critiques and ask questions, and it's like the next best thing to, I think, probably being in a college program. And I took and I'm still taking full advantage of that place. And then the other place, which has turned out to be the studio that I'm currently working for, but Leslie Canahan, who runs that White Buffalo studio, also has kind of an educational program that she runs that's more about the business of it and how to get a job in the field and set up your portfolio and just kind of insider industry knowledge that, like, just doesn't exist anywhere. It's kind of like a big mystery if you don't know anyone. Like, there's certain fields where there's tons of articles and you can just find out, and it doesn't really exist much in this industry. So I was working with her. She did a portfolio review for me. I took her portfolio builder class, some other online classes, and then I got real brave and decided, what the heck? And I just sent her a mini portfolio of my work I had done so far. And she invited me to start, doing freelance work for them as one of their freelance artists. So that paid off, and that was really lucky. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started, and that's been a great experience so far.
Well, my favorite, I love your plaids. Those are my favorite, the plaid ones, and there's some of
Oh.
the flower ones, but I love plaid. And I love
Oh,
the style
yes.
of how you do those too.
Thank you. Yeah, that came, I think the ones you're talking about were for White Buffalo Studio,
Mm-hmm.
and the mood board or the direction board, the prompt was to create stripes and plaids. It was based on some stuff that's been seen on the runway recently for spring, where like really bright colors and just really fun, plaids, checks, and stripes,
Mm-hmm.
which I really gravitated to, and had fun with it. So thank you. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, I want to totally check out your stores because there are several products I can think of, like home decor type things, where I would really want to have like maybe pillows or something with that plaid or something like that. So I got to check that out. So, and speaking of my needing to go to your stores to check out the products, because I've seen the work, now I need to see the products too. Why don't you share where people can find your stores?
Yeah, I currently have stores on Spoonflower and Society 6. So I think you'll provide the links to those. You should be able to
Yes.
see my work there. It'll be different from the prints that I have with White Buffalo because my
Hmm.
agreement with them is exclusive.
Hmm.
Um, so, but yeah, I have some things on both of those.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. This has been really fun to talk about.
Thank you, Colleen. Thanks for having me.
If this content was helpful, you can support the podcast by buying me a coffee. It might actually end up being a glass of wine or some tea, but you could go to buymeacoffee.com/creative boost.